Welcome to China Manufacturing Decoded from Sofeast, the podcast where we take you through the major news and topics facing importers and manufacturers in China and Asia today.
Hello everyone, it's Adrian from the Sofeast team here, and I'm joined by our CEO, Renaud. Renaud, hi.
Hey, hi Adrian, and hi everybody, and we hope that everybody enjoyed and is enjoying the festive season.
Yes. As we're reaching you now, this is episode 85, and this is the end of the year. So we're on New Year's Eve 2021, and I guess we'll start off with a big Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah, well, happy, or at least not too unhappy, because as we're going to discuss, things are not looking very nice.
Oh yeah, there's definitely some challenges out there, but this is sort of a bit of an unusual episode for us because we're not focusing on a particular topic. Rather, we're sort of recapping the year of 2021, and yeah, it's been a year, Renaud. It's been a journey.
Oh yes. So yeah, if we go down a few big themes. Obviously, COVID. It's funny because 1 year ago, people were saying, once the vaccines roll out, it's all going to be fine. And then, the vaccines are rolling out, and then you have this variant and that variant. And the vaccines just keep most people out of hospital, but still, it doesn't mean everything's fine, right? And we're afraid that 2022 is going to be more of the same. Even if the vaccination rates are high, well, what's going to happen is that in the so-called developed countries, the rich countries that had access to vaccines first, they're going to go for, they're already going for the first, number 3, third jab as a booster shot, and then they're going to go for number 4, number 5. So basically, every few months, you stimulate your antibodies, but there's a lot of uncertainty. But what it seems that is that China is not going to change its zero COVID policy, just because with the vaccines that they have and with the healthcare system that they have, they can't really cope with a wide infections in their country, or maybe they're afraid that they might not be able to really keep on top of it. And there's a lot of political things behind it, and what they've been telling their population, that they're so good because they really control what's going on and so on. So they're not going to let things roll their natural course. This is not going to happen. So that means a very isolated country still in 2022, very probably, right? Yeah, and suppliers that don't get visit from their customers and that may not pay much attention to what they're doing and to their production processes and so on. So that's a little bit of an issue for a lot of buyers. Supply chain crisis, sea freight has been horrible, and it's still horrible, pretty much the worst for the US for sure, from the latest numbers that we've seen. In Europe, it's also pretty bad, and it's not going to fall back in place in a matter of a few weeks. We discussed it in a few episodes ago with Marshall Taplitz, yes. Sorry. And Chinese New Year might give a little bit of time to catch up, but it's certainly not going to be enough. So we might be in for another full year of the same crazy prices and crazy delays and so on.
At this point, it's hard to say. Maybe by sort of February, March time, it'll be clearer how much effect that sort of respite during Chinese New Year has given to, the shipping companies that is going into the States, for example, and if they do manage to clear a lot of that backlog.
Yeah. Plus, there's another uncertainty is how much of the current purchases are for putting goods on the shelves and sending them to e-commerce warehouses and so on and so forth, or versus how much of it is actually to replenish stock, right?
Good point.
In some industries, some buyers have said, okay, this what they call just in time, okay, in their model, which is quite different from what the auto industry calls just in time. But anyway, what they call just in time, now they say, well, this is no longer working because we cannot really count on the supply chain to get what we need with reasonable lead time. So now it's more just in case. So they have to buy more to have more inventory ready to serve their markets, right? So in some product categories there is some of that. Is this going to, especially consumer goods, is this going to cool off? Who knows? Really, who knows? It's a big unknown, right?
Whenever there's uncertainty, one of the first things that it's human nature, isn't it, to try to build up that buffer, build up that safety net. And so a lot of businesses are saying, you know what, we're going to bring in additional stock to keep that inventory in the warehouse just in case. So if we're predicting a continuing uncertain year in 2022, maybe that's not going to change just yet.
Right. And it's good business sense. I mean, you have to keep serving your customers. If you cannot count on getting the goods, with a 8-week lead time or whatever it used to be, well, then you need to have more inventory. That's normal. Yeah. Another one is the tensions between China and United States / Australia / some European countries / who knows, Japan and others. Who knows? Well, this year has been relatively eventful with AUKUS, this a UK-US alliance, and what the Senate and the Congress in the US keep banging on China for slave labor and things like that, or forced labor.
Yeah.
I don't know what to call it. So the dynamics are still there, still at play, and we don't know where this is going to lead us. So I mean, I guess the same dynamics are still going to go ahead. Let's see if the European Union kind of finally have a common position on that. Of course, with the weight of Germany and the German auto industry and exporting industry in general, is not going to be very tough on China. That's that's the reality of it. So let's see.
Yeah, they like their German cars in China.
Oh, they do, yes, and they do manufacture a lot in China now, but still export a lot. Chinese buyers like to say, well, my car was made in Germany, right?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that just as a quick explanation to whoever's listening, that in China, you can buy a domestically built, I don't know, let's say, I don't know for sure on the models, but a BMW 5 Series, or you can pay more to have an imported one. And those imported models have more sort of kudos. It's more desirable to pay that extra and get the import. So it's kind of a weird system, isn't it?
Right. And there is demand for that. And some of the higher models, like maybe the A4 and A6 of Audi are made in China, but maybe if you want the A8, it's only made in Germany. I mean, don't quote me on that, but there was a distinction like that, I remember.
Sure.
So, the political tensions leading to more companies trying to diversify their sources outside of China, but this has been extremely difficult for a lot of them, especially the traders, basically, who buy products and don't want to have anything to do with manufacturing, and especially the traders that or retailers that don't want to have anything to do with product development. They go and they say, okay, I want this kind of whatever office chair. Oh, okay, it's already here in your showroom. I want the same in gray, right? In this kind of packing, and you're gonna make 500 of these for me in the next 2 months, right? So if you like that, then it's kind of hard to get out of China, and it's even harder with products that are electrical or have electronic parts, just because it's very hard to go to India or Vietnam and just have a showroom full of whatever coffee machines or whatever you want to buy and say, I want this one, right? So it's very hard for certain types of importers, but it is feasible, and some companies, small and medium-sized companies, have already started to diversify. Let's see, but I think there's an interest, there's a strong interest. Let's say it this way. So let's see where it goes next year. I expect more of the same interest, but also not many moves by small and medium-sized companies, but we'll see more large companies moving production out. Let's see.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the key problems, as you've mentioned before, it's even if you move let's say your assembly out of China, you still, in many cases, you've got to get all those components from China. So it's almost like a self-defeating, move, isn't it, in some ways?
Absolutely. So if you move assembly, but you keep buying the components and materials from China, well, you still depend on China anyway. If something goes wrong with China, you're going to be impacted anyway. And now you're spreading your manufacturing in one more country that itself might have issues, right?
Yeah.
And who's going to pick up on the quality problem on that custom component, right? It's like the story of was it the Airbus A380? Yeah, I think so. Where between some German subcontractors and some French subcontractors, and then they designed everything, they agreed on everything, and then when they were assembling, they say, well, this cable needs to be 2 meters longer or something. Oh, what do we do now? So there's certain things that you only notice when you actually put the products together. And if you buy PCBAs in Shenzhen and you assemble it together with into the final product in Shenzhen, then if something goes wrong, you can do your incoming quality control with functional testing and things like that. If you see some kind of issue, you send it back to the PCBA supplier, and you can fix the problem relatively quickly. However, if you send all of that to, say, to Mexico or to Romania, and you find the problem over there, then it's a very different ballgame.
Yeah.
Very different, much, much more costly in time and money.
Absolutely. Some of the points that we've just been talking about, these are fairly negative. There's been definitely some issues that have made life more difficult for importers with, Asian supply chains, especially in China in 2021. But you see a lot of articles out there on the internet, which is really doom and gloom. And it's like, talking about this is the end of manufacturing in China and topics like that. And I think that's too negative, right? Because despite all that's just been said, a lot of SMEs, for example, they're still manufacturing in China. That has just simply not changed.
Right. So I haven't seen any numbers on that, but really, so if you look at soft goods, garments and home textile and so on, that has been distributed, all over, let's say, Southeast and South Asia and China. right? Places like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, of course, Vietnam and Cambodia. There's a lot of textile manufacturing over there. This has been spreading already for the past 25 years. You know, when maybe 20 years ago, there was a lot of that in China. And then as the cost in China rose, it kind of went to other countries over time. Well, now if you look at hard goods, much harder to get out of China, much harder. And yeah, I haven't seen China's exports really crumble or anything. I mean, it's actually been a good year for them. So that's the reality. That's the reality. You know, people look at countries like Vietnam now as a source of risk because there's been a pretty severe lockdown in like in Ho Chi Minh City for something like 2 or 3 months. And a lot of productions were delayed, and it's just an example. Or look at Myanmar and the horrible situation there, right? A lot of factories just closed because of political events. Now, I'm not saying that China is very safe, but that's the impression that has been giving foreign buyers.
Yeah. I think the stability is there, and I mean India's huge, but and it's possible to produce hard goods and get components in India, like electronic components. Actually, we've been creating some content about that recently on the Sofeast blog. But that being said, if you compare it to China, it's nowhere near in terms of the convenience or the ability to, you know, have that infrastructure to obtain all of your components and assemble your products with certain hard goods, I would say.
Right. Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So if I can ask you to gaze into your crystal ball.
As I said, more of the same, unfortunately. Logistics issues, probably more of the same. Throughout the whole year, I would say. China being closed off, is not going to open nicely to everybody after the February Olympics. I don't believe that's going to happen.
No, I don't think so.
They're actually going to have to buckle down very seriously with this, what's it called, Omicron variant, right?
Yep.
You know, it's going to be, it is very high tension, you know, already these days in Guangdong, in Zhejiang. I mean, it's been impacting a lot of exporting manufacturers, and it might get even worse. So
did they not just lock down Xi'an as well? You know, and that's like a city of I don't know how many tens of millions of people or something. I think
they say
that happened.
13 million, 10 plus 3.
Yeah.
It's nearly a full lockdown. Correct. Yes.
So it is disruptive. I mean, I'm in the UK, as listeners probably have recognised and heard from, but we're sort of ground zero for Omicron at the moment. And you mentioned the booster program. Most people are on to their third vaccination now. That's correct. And I mean, they've said basically this variant, it's so contagious that it's going to find all of the people who don't have the necessary immunity, and there's sort of nowhere to hide. So I'm not talking about the UK specifically, though, but if we compare that to China, 1.4 billion people, a lot of people certainly haven't had 3 doses of a vaccine in China. And I don't know for sure whether the Chinese vaccines would be as effective against it, because I don't have any information about that. So,
well, they have, they are more than 80% already vaccinated from, you know, the official numbers. The thing is, it's their, you know, Sinopharm and Sinovac vaccines.
Yeah.
Probably gonna help to keep you out of hospital.
Right.
With a certain probability. However, from what I read, and also there was an article on the China Law blog about that.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't slow the spread of the Omicron virus.
So you've got the disruption, because even if you're not that ill, you're still needing to isolate yourself for a period of time. And if we look at China, for example, you're not talking about thousands of people. It could be hundreds of millions of people having to isolate, and that disrupts the entire society.
Right. And I mean, some people are, aged. A few people are overweight and aged. The hospitals are going to break down, are going to be totally submerged, even if people are vaccinated. And anyway, as I said, primarily it's a political issue. The government doesn't want to look weak or like, it got out of control. The government is not smart enough to keep it under control. They really don't want that to happen. So expect strong, very fast and very strong reactions.
Yeah, which could disrupt supply chains, unfortunately, if it's in the wrong place. And that article written by Dan Harris on China Law Blog about Omicron in China, I'll include the link in the show notes as ever. He did mention that it's definitely a good time to keep in close contact with suppliers in China, and also to consider trying to bring in the extra inventory like we were discussing earlier as well. And I guess those are some key messages for 2022 as they have been in 2021, just to really try to keep as good a control over your supply chain as possible.
Yeah, I'm not very optimistic. Sorry about that. This is not looking good. It's not looking good.
Well, let's hope that it turns out that we were able to be optimistic in 2022. But unfortunately, based on what we've seen, I think your predictions are pretty fair. Okay, so moving on then. Sofeast, that's who we are. In 2021, what are some of the key stories about what we've been doing that you can share with everybody?
Sure. So a lot of stuff. So basically, what we do is we look at the requests and the needs of our clients, and then we try to adapt, right? And that's really what's been driving what we've been doing over the years. A few big things to mention. One is for the project management side, for the new products that are developed and brought into production. So we have various teams, right? So there's a project manager, always keeping in contact with the supplier, following up on what's going on, and basically responsible for the supply chain and timelines. And then there's R&D to work on maybe feasibility study, proof of concept, prototypes, and so on. There's a quality person, we call them quality project manager, who has to follow up on the project all along. There's what we call the production project manager, usually process engineers, but who also have to follow up. So they start a little bit later than the quality one, but still they have to follow up all along and into mass production. There's obviously purchasing that needs to be involved at some point, and yes, these are the main actors. So how all these people work together and how they actually work in a very structured and systematic manner. Yeah, this has been a lot of this has taken a lot of work, because we've had to define our own process for new product development, and we've gone through a lot of iterations of checklists, one checklist per team, and finally, we did a pilot on two projects, and then we rolled it out to all the projects, and it's forcing the teams to fill out certain documents, do some risk analysis, to do this and to do that, a bunch of things not to forget. There are good practices and certain things that are really extremely important and lead to milestones that, it's like a gate, right? Go and no go at various stages to see if the project is ready to go to the next stage. So that has taken a lot of time, and we've made a lot of progress on that. So it's, when it used to take an enormous amount of management time just to follow up on what's going on. Now it's more like, oh, here they flagged it as a risk. Okay, we're going to look at what's going on. Here's a support request from this one to this one, and it hasn't been followed up on. Okay, let's go and have a look at what's going on. It's a lighter load on management, which has been quite positive.
Okay.
On the production side, we've put things in a format of SOPs and forms and things like that ISO auditors like. So we're actually in the middle of getting certified to ISO 9001 for production of certain electromechanical products with the BSI, British Standard Institution, which is one of the premier certification bodies, because otherwise, if you do it with a company that nobody's really heard of or nobody really trusts, then it's really totally useless. But this is good to reassure certain customers that for good or bad reasons say that they only want to work with ISO 9001 certified manufacturers. So that's a good thing. And then we're talking about projects for next year, more work on information security, more work on going deeper into quality management, and more work into being more eco-friendly and having the policies and everything around that. This is what's in the box. So let's see next year what comes out of that. In the quality assurance department, a few things. I mean, we've been kind of forced to do more off-site inspections, like remote inspections, remote audits. So we've had to set a few work instructions, and we've been working on finding the right IT tools also to facilitate it, and we're still working on that actually. Things like Zoom are not great for example, in China, but WeChat is not great either. So we're actually these days we're working on using an open source alternative to Zoom and setting it up on our server, and it works for the proof of concept, but we haven't yet gotten to really use it in the real off-site inspection audit. But we'll this is coming soon, so we're working on a few things, right?
Just to go into the off-site inspections and audits just very quickly. I mean, by necessity, because of COVID, for example, some suppliers don't permit visitors either from abroad, like yourself, if you're listening, or inspectors from Sofeast, for example. So, so what do you do? How do you inspect or audit anything? And that's where these come into it.
Yeah, right. That's what has forced us to do it, and it's in a way you might say it's pretty crude, and it's kind of hard for them, easy for the supplier to cheat and things like that. But actually, if you are very directive, if you say very specifically, okay, take this like this and position it like this and so on, it's there's still a lot of things you can pick up in a photo, right, or in a video call. Actually, it's more of a problem when they know exactly what you're looking for and they have a lot of experience in that. But in many cases, you actually still catch issues. So it's better than nothing, let's say this way. However, where it's interesting is that you can actually blend it in a sort of a program with on-site and off-site work together, because certain things can be done as well off-site as on-site, reviewing some documents or whatever, right? Or, certain things can just be double-checked by, through a few photos. I don't know. Let's say the labeling is extremely important. They need to get it right. And there's certain mistakes they might make. Okay, well then, take some photos of exactly how you do the labeling on the first carton, send us some photos, send us maybe let's do a live video call, confirm it's okay, and then they can keep going, rather than wait until everything is packed and then we come in for an inspection and then we find the issues, right? So it's also a way of helping more than coming and check like policemen, right? So it's good to blend things together. That business unit, is adapting to the times. Yeah. Also, the warehouse has been gaining a lot of experience with fulfillment, so that's a good thing. So because we have actually more than 10,000 square meters now in Dongguan, and some of that is for offices, and some of that is for our little lab and for assembly and packing, but some of that is also for the warehouse. And some of our projects, are like purely about fulfillment. You receive these cartons and out of that, from that factory, and this from that factory, you kit it together, or maybe you just consolidate the shipments, maybe you do some drop shipments, maybe you do some you apply some extra labeling, and so on and so forth. So this is a capability that that we've been developing, because it's one more thing that we can offer our good clients, and they might not use this or that capability, but they might use this one. So and some of our clients they use a lot of our capabilities of all the business units. It's all complementary, let's say it this way.
Great. Nice to hear about what Sofeast has been up to as a business, because we don't normally go into an enormous amount of detail on the podcast, because we try to keep it sort of more educational, don't we? But that's who's actually behind this podcast. So it is good to understand. So to move on, if we turn to the podcast again, so let's talk about some of the top episodes of this year. And you can go back and check these out. I will put the links in the show notes. Top episode, John Munro, who is a shipping expert in the States. He joined you to talk about how sea freight basically ended up being a complete mess. That's unsurprisingly the most popular episode this year.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. That makes a lot of sense. Well, first, it was a good one, full of facts and explanations about how we got to such a mess. And really, it's just top of mind for any company that imports products, right? Because even if you ship by air, well, unfortunately, it's always expensive, polluting, and everything. But some people do that. Yeah, air freight is more expensive than before, also, right? So everybody is, if you want to ship by train, let's say from China to Europe, yeah, it's possible. But now the lead times are getting longer and longer. From what I heard, it's not that easy either. So it's top of mind for everybody, of course.
Yeah. Okay. And the second one, actually from 2020, the 3 types of quality control plans and why they're needed before production. So those QC plans are the product QC plan, the process control plan, and the QC plan for a new product being brought to market. So you basically went into great detail about all of these plans, and because they're very important for buyers to really understand them, right?
Right. So this is really in the case where you want to make sure, that things don't go in a bad direction, let's say, and you want to put controls in place. And well, some of these are about manufacturing processes. Some of them are more about quality control in general, more like end of the line kind of quality control. But it was good to go over that, and hopefully people found it interesting.
The third, preventive maintenance and its many benefits.
Yeah, well, that's tightly linked to process controls. How do you keep the production equipment running when necessary, and running to make good parts, good products, right? Yeah, actually, I'm a bit surprised. Okay, that maybe people in manufacturing, hopefully they found it interesting, but maybe also some people who were kind of wondering what it's all about. This preventive maintenance idea. That's good.
Okay. The next one, I think this is our top episode of all time. It's analyzing the NPI process, so the new product introduction process. And I think as we go into 2022, we'll try and revisit this topic as I've mentioned recently, because it has been so popular. I mean, what is it about this topic, do you think, that makes it so important to go over?
Well, this is something that actually a lot of companies don't, maybe you have never heard of, right? So a lot of people think you develop a new product and it's like you go from unknown to unknown, and there's no way to really systematize it, and you just try and you see what works, and then you kind of try to plan, but it's going to be very different from the plan anyway, and so on and so forth. A lot of people have told me these kind of things, and I mean, to an extent, when you design at the very beginning, it's, you're putting the concept together. Of course, that's true. But as you get closer to making the tooling and going into production, well, it's much better to have a structured process that, where you have to go through gates and do certain, verify, validate certain things before you go to the next phase, because this way you keep the risk down, the risk of having to go back and maybe even purchasing materials, components that are not going to be a good fit or whatever, right? Or making production and then finding that the product doesn't work after 2 weeks in the field. And there's a lot of problems, a lot of risks that can actually be anticipated and prevented with the right kind of process. So, well, I'm glad people find that interesting, and I really hope more people are aware of the current, let's say, good practices across a number of industries that really work well to help move a new product from idea all the way to mass production and to the markets in good conditions.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I mean, we've created a lot of content about that because it's just so central to what we do, isn't it? So,
Correct.
so yeah, makes a lot of sense. But that's definitely one to revisit in fairly early 2022. And finally, this rounds out the top 5. So, an episode about manufacturing in China, Vietnam, India, or elsewhere in 2021. So this ties into diversifying supply chains, as we spoke about earlier.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people are, looking for information, which makes sense.
So those episodes, I'll leave the links to those if you want to go back and revisit those, our most popular episodes of the year. And before we sign off and let everybody get on with their New Year's Eve party, just a few suggestions, because we're creating other content than just the podcast. And I mean, in the show notes, we usually give links to have a look at different things. From my perspective, really, really useful to go to sofeast.com /resources, and we collect all of the different resources that we create and we've been doing over the years into this resources center. And I think some of the key resources to highlight this year, Renaud, I think you would agree, we created an IP protection in China guide for anybody that's developing new products. You wrote that fairly recently, Renaud?
Yes, right. So, I mean, again, since we work mostly with companies that develop their own products, one thing that is top of mind is always, how do I make sure I don't get copied? And the short answer is, sorry, but once your product is out there, if you put it on Kickstarter, if you put it on Amazon and so on, if it's successful, people are going to notice anyway. If you get this popular blogger or YouTuber, to review it and so on and so forth, I mean, people are going to notice it anyway. And there are companies in China that, especially in Shenzhen, that are just always on the lookout for products to copy. So the question is, how do you minimize the risk of that? And also, of course, there are a lot of questions around how to pick the right suppliers who will not try to, who will not leak the design information, who will not try to compete against you, and so on and so forth. And we cover all of these in this in that guide. And actually, a few podcast episodes ago, we went through that, right?
Yeah. You talked about the key risks to when you might get copied. So the main risks to product IP. So that could be from people within your supply chain, before the product hits the market. For example, that's one of the scenarios. So, that's one to go back to check out. That is, I'm just trying to remember which episode number it is. It's episode 80, so 5 ago. Yeah. Some other content. One that is always super popular, the Importer's Guide to 9 key types of packaging, including costs and benefits. This is also from the Resources Centre. So we've given examples of the types of packaging you might encounter and might find useful, depending on what sort of product you're putting out there, and some estimated costs and even how green they are, which is important to a lot of businesses at the moment. So that's also a good one. And I mean, you've said many times, Renaud, that when you're developing a product, one of the things that you shouldn't forget is also are you developing the correct packaging as well? Are you selecting the correct packaging?
Oh yes. There's certain products where the packaging actually costs more than the product. I mean, go to an Apple store, you will see a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like if you're buying a dongle and it comes in a very, very fancy little box that's beautifully printed and made and whatever, that's got to be almost more than the little electronic widget inside. I don't know. And there's also some white papers in there, for example, which are just PDFs. You don't need to fill any forms to read these. So how to define silicon or plastic finishes for new products, that's a white paper. Types of printing processes used in manufacturing. I mean, pretty much everybody will benefit from this sort of information. Benefits of silicon, oil-based plastic alternatives. So that's bioplastics. Again, this is quite top of mind at the moment for a lot of businesses that are trying to be greener. So, yeah, I think if there's one New Year's resolution to recommend, it's check out the Sofeast Resources Centre.
Yes, there's a lot of interesting resources. Yes, might be useful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Renaud, thanks for joining me today. Thanks everybody for listening throughout 2021, and we'll be back in 2022 soon.
All right. Well, talk to everybody next year then.
Yeah. So Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Renaud.
Yeah. Happy New Year. Thank you. Happy New Year to all.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.